Okay, in this video I'm going to be doing a detailed campground tour of Hanna Park in Jacksonville, Florida. I'll be going through and giving a detailed site-by-site video view of each campsite. On the screen, each site will be numbered, and on the voiceover, I'll be telling whether it's a tent site, 25-foot, 35-foot, 40-foot, or 40-foot site, and whether it's a pull-through or a back-in site. I'm going to start here at row A, and I will continue down all through the rows through row L. Then I cut over the other side and I go from M all the way to W. I will have timestamp links in the video description that will take you directly to some of the site numbers, so you don't have to scroll through the whole video if you're looking for a particular site number. Okay, we're going to start on row A on the right hand side with spot number 5, which is a tent site. And right beside that we got another tent site, which is site number 6. And then we go down a little bit further, got a little space here, and then we got site number 7, which is another tent site. You can see these sites are pretty small, but they still have connections. And then we're going to have a little gap right here, and then we get into site number 8, which is a pull-through site. Now I'm actually going to cut through 8 to get to site 1, 2, 3, and 4, but you would actually continue down row A there, curve around, and you would hit 4, 3, 2, 1, but I'm just kind of taking a shortcut here. So you can here's site number 1, which is purple, which is up to 35 feet. Then we got site number 2, 3, and 4, which are all tent sites. So here's 2. There's 3. Site number 4 here is a light blue up to 45 feet site. Okay, so now we're going to come back up on row A, but we're going to start at number 9 on the left hand side, which is a yellow, which is up to 40 feet. Then you got 10, which is also yellow, 40 feet, pull through. Then we got site number 11, which is also yellow, a 40-foot pull through. Site number 12, also a yellow, 40-foot pull through. Then we got site number 13 on the left here. It's also a yellow, 40-foot pull through. Then we got site number 14 at the end on the left here, which is also a yellow, 40-foot pull through. Okay, now we're going to come down row B on the left hand side, site number 16, which is a purple up to 35 feet. We got number 17, which is yellow up to 40 feet. 18 is also yellow up to 40 feet. Now these all on the left hand side, these are all back in sites, not pull through. Number 19 also yellow up to 40 feet. Number 20, also yellow, up to 40 feet. Now starting with 21, this is a purple. This is going to be up to 35 feet. Again, it's also back in. Number 22, it's also purple, up to 35 feet again, a little gap here. And then at the end, we got number 23, also purple, up to 35 feet, also back in. Okay, now we're going to come down row C on the right hand side, site number 24, which is a purple, up to 35 feet, back in. Then we got right hand side, site number 25, also up to 35 feet, back in. Site number 26 is also a back in, 35 feet, purple. And we got a little gap. And we got site number 27, which is also up to 35 feet, purple. Back in site. Site number 28, up to 35 feet, purple. Then you got site number 29, which is up to 35 feet, back in. Site number 30, also 35 feet and a back in. Then you got site number 31 here on the end, also a 35 foot back in. Okay, now we're going to come up to row D on the right hand side, which is site number 32, which is light gray, which is a tent site. Now we got site number 33, which is yellow, which is up to 40 feet. And we got site number 34, which is also yellow, up to 40 feet. 35 is also yellow, up to 40 feet. And all these on the right hand side, these are all pull through sites. Number 36 also yellow, up to 40 feet, pull through. 37 is also yellow, up to 40 feet, pull through. Little gap here. We got site number 38, which is also a yellow, up to 40 feet, pull through. And at the end we've got site number 39, which is also yellow, up to 40 foot, pull through. Okay, we're coming down row D now on the left hand side, which is starting with site number 40, which is a purple, which is up to 35 feet. Number 41, which is also purple, up to 35 feet, pull through. 42, which is a yellow, coming up here, which is up to 40 feet, pull through. Now number 43, which is also yellow, up to 40 feet, pull through. 44, yellow, up to 40 feet, pull through. Number 45, yellow, up to 40 feet, pull through. Number 46, which is a yellow, up to 40 feet, pull through. And the last one on the left here is number 47, also 40 foot, pull through. Okay, now we're going to come down to row E, starts with cabin 16 on the left. It's the only cabin on this row. And after cabin 16, we've got site number 49, which is purple, which is a 35 up to 35 foot back in. Then you've got site number 50, which is also a purple, up to 35 foot back in. Then you got site number 51, which is also a purple, up to 35 foot back in. Now starting here at site number 52, they switch to up to 40 feet back in. Site number 53, also a up to 40 foot back in. Site number 54, also a up to 40 foot back in. Now starting with 55 here, it switches to purple, which is up to 35 feet back in. And then number 56, which is also up to 35 foot back in. 57, which is actually a blue, which is up to 45 foot back in. And then number 58, which is up to 35 foot back. Okay, now we're coming down row F on the right hand side with site number 59, which is purple, 35 foot back in. And then site number 60, also 35 foot back in. 61, these are kind of close together, also a 35 foot back in. 62, 35 foot back in, purple. 63, there's a little bit of a gap here. Also 35 foot back in. 64, kind of close. 35 foot back in. 65, 35 foot back in. 66 and 67, also 35 foot back in. Number 68, also a 35 foot back in. 69, a 35 foot back in. Now starting with 70, they switch up to 40 foot back in. Friendly guy there. And then we go to 71, which switches back to a 35 foot back in. And then we got to 72, which is a 40 foot back in. It's a friendly row. And then we got number 73 here, which is a 35 foot back in. At the very end, we got the site number 74, which is a 35 foot back in. Okay, coming down row F here, I'm just going to turn around as it approaches the lake, and we're going to come back up row F in the opposite direction, starting with site number 84 on the right hand side, and then this will be counting down. So it'll go from 84, which is a blue, which is up to 45 foot site, and this is actually, I think, a back end site. And then right beside that, we got number 83, which is also a 35 foot site. Now 82, these 82, 81, and 80 are marked as tent only sites. That's why they're kind of close together, but they still have all the facilities. They're just marked for tent only, because they're kind of shallow. Then we got kind of a gap here until we get to site number 79. But all these coming down, 79, 78, and 77 are all marked as tent only sites. Got a little bit of a gap here through the trees, but you can see these all have tents on them. They look like they could handle like a Class B or something, but they're marked on the campground map as tent only. Now number 76 here, that's marked as up to 35 foot, even though that is definitely bigger than a 35 foot. And then 75, this is marked on the map as a campground host. Okay, now we're coming down row G on the right hand side. Starting with site number 85 is a tent site. 86, actually 86 all the way through 92 here are all tent sites. So there's 86. And there's a little gap here before we get to site number 87, even though these probably could take a pop-up or something small. They're marked as tent only, which is like the light gray on the map. When you look at the map, light gray and blue are hard to distinguish, but you can see all these have tents on them. So 87, 88, 89, all tent site. Site number 90 is tent. 91, also tent only. 92, tent only. Starting with 93, this is up to 35 foot. 94 is up to 35 foot. It's a back-end site. 95 is also up to 35 foot back end. And the last one on this row, site number 97, is actually a blue up to 45 foot. Okay, going back on row G on the left hand side, starting with site number 98, which is a yellow up to 40 foot, pull through. Site number 99, which is up to 45 foot pull through. Site 100, which is also up to 45 foot pull through. Site number 101, which is also up to 45 foot pull through. You can see these are some pretty sizable campsites here. Site number 102, which is also up to 45 foot pull through. Now starting with 103, they are up to 35 foot pull through. And then 104, which is only up to 25 foot pull through. So 104, 105, and 106 are only up to 25 foot pull through. Okay, we're actually going to come back up row H and we're going to count down from 110, which is up to 40 foot back end. 109, also up to 40 foot back end. 108, also up to 40 foot back end. A little corner here, and then we're going to do 107, also up to a 40 foot back end. Then we go to site number 121, and we're going to be counting down, which is up to 35 foot back end. Also, site number 120, also up to 35 foot back end. Site number 119, also up to 35 foot back end. Site number 118, also up to 35 foot back end. Now 117 is up to a 45 foot back end. And then site number 116 is up to a 40 foot back end. Then we go to site number 115 is up to a 35 foot back end. And then 114, 113, and 112 are all up to 35 foot back ends. And the site at the end, number 111, is a campground host site, which is right on the corner of the main road. Okay, now we're going to come down row I from the main road, turning right and looking at sites on the right hand side, starting with 122, which is up to 25 foot back end. Site number 123 also is actually up to 35 foot back end. 124 is up to 35 foot back end. 125 goes up to 40 foot back end. 126 also up to 40 foot back end. 127 is up to 35 foot back end. 128 up to 40 foot back end. 129 up to 40 foot back end. Those are kind of close together. Site number 130 also up to 40 foot back end. Site number 131 is also up to 40 foot back end. And on the end of row I, site number 132, which is a very spacious site, up to 40 foot back end, right at the end of the lake. Now we're going to be coming down row J from the main road on the right hand side, starting with site number 133, a 25 foot pull through. Then site number 134, which is up to 35 foot pull through. Site number 135, which is up to 35 foot pull through. Site number 136, which is up to 40-foot pull-through. Site number 137, which is up to 40-foot pull-through. Now site number 138 is up to 35-foot pull-through. Site number 139 is up to 40-foot pull-through. Site number 140 is up to 40-foot pull-through. Site number 141 is up to 40-foot pull-through. And at the end of the row, site number 142, overlooking the lake there, is up to 40-foot pull-through. Okay, coming back down row J again from the main road on the left-hand side, number 143, which was a yellow up to 40-foot pull-through. Site number 144 is a blue up to 45-foot pull-through. Site number 145 here is up to 40-foot pull-through, yellow. 146 is also yellow up to 40-foot pull-through. Site number 147, also yellow up to 40-foot pull-through. Site number 148 is yellow up to 40-foot pull-through. Site number 149 is also a yellow up to 40-foot pull-through. Site number 150 is up to 45-foot pull-through. And site number 151 on the end here is a 40-foot, up to 40-foot pull-through at the end as it faces the lake. Okay, we're going to be coming down row K from the main road on the left-hand side, starting with site number 152, up to 45-foot pull-through. Site number 153, also up to 45-foot pull-through. 154, also up to 45-foot pull-through. Site number 155 is up to 40-foot pull-through. Site 156 goes back up to 45-foot pull-through. Site number 157 is up to 40-foot pull-through. 158 is an up to 45-foot pull-through. Site 159, a 45-foot pull-through. Site 160, up to 45-foot pull-through. You can see these are some sizable sites. And at the end is number 161, also a 45-foot pull-through at the end of the line with a good access to the lake. Okay, we're going to be coming back up row L in the opposite direction, counting down, starting with 175, which is a 35-foot back in, 174, which is a 40-foot back in, 73 is a 40-foot back in, 172 is a 40-foot back in. These are kind of close together. 171 also a 40-foot back in. 170 a 40-foot back in. 169 a 40-foot back in. 168 a 40-foot back in. 167 is a 40-foot back in. 166 is a 40-foot back in. 165 is also a 40-foot back in. 164 goes down to a 35-foot back in. But 163 goes up to a 45-foot back in. And then 162 at the end here is the campground host. Okay, now we're going to switch around and go down the other side of the park, starting on row M, site number 176, which is a purple 35-foot. which is 177, also 35 foot. These are all back end sites on the side of row M. 78, 35 foot back end site. 179, 35 foot back end site. 180 switches up to a 40 foot back end site. 181, 40 foot back end site. 182, a 40 foot back end site. 183, a 35 foot back end site. 184, a 40 foot back end site. 185, a 40 foot back end site. 186, a 35 foot back end site, and 187, a 35 foot back end site. Okay, coming down row N is site number 188, which is a 40 foot pull through site. 189, also a 40 foot pull through site. 190 is a 35 foot pull through site. 191, a 35 foot pull through site. 192, a 35 foot pull through. 193, a 35 foot pull through. And it ends in 194 as a 40 foot pull through site. Okay, we're going to come back down row N again, but we're going to be going on the left side this time. Site number 195, our 40 foot pull through. 196, 40 foot pull through. 197, 40 foot pull through. 198, 40 foot pull through. These are kind of close together. 198, 40 foot pull through. 199, 40 foot pull through. 200 is a 40 foot pull through. 201, 40 foot pull through. And 202 here at the end is also a 40 foot pull through. Okay, now we're going to come back down row N. These are all back in, starting with 203, which was a camp host. 204, which is a back end 35 foot site. 205, back end 35 foot. 206, back end 35 foot. 207, a 35 foot back end. 208, a 35 foot back end. 209, 35 foot back end. 210 is a 25 foot back end, and 211 is a 45 foot back end. Okay, next we're coming down the right side of row P. 212 is a 40 foot back end. 213 is a 35 foot back end. 214 is a 35 foot back end. 215 is a 35 foot back end. 216 is a 35 foot back end. 217, 35 foot. 218, 35 foot back end. 219 is a 25 foot back end. 220 is a 35 foot back end. We come around the corner here to 221, 35 foot back end, and 222, 35 foot back end. Okay, coming back up row P in the opposite direction, 229 on the right is a 40 foot back end. 228 on the right, 40 foot back end. Of course, we're counting down here. 227, 35 foot back end. 226 is a 35 foot back end. 225 is a 35 foot back end. 224 is a 35-foot back in. And the end of the row, we have 223, which is a 40-foot back in. Next, we're going to come down row Q with 230 on the right-hand side here. This is a 35-foot back in. 231, 25-foot back in. 232 is marked as a tent site. 233 is also marked as a tent site. 234 is a 35-foot back in. 235 is also marked as a tent site. 236 is a 35-foot back in. I'm just going to turn around here on row Q, headed back the other direction, and we're going to start on the right hand side here with site number 243, and we're going to be counting down. So site number 243 is a 40-foot back-in site. Next we've got 242, which is a 35-foot back-in site. 241 is a 40-foot back-in site. 240 is a 40-foot back-in site. 239 is a 40-foot back-in site. 238 is a 40-foot back-in site. At the end of the row, back at the street, is a campground host site at 237. Next, we're going to come down row R on the right-hand side here from the main road. 244 is a campground host. 245 is marked as a tent site. 246 is a 40-foot back-in site. 247 is a 40-foot back-in site. 248 is a 35-foot back-in site. And at the end, 249 is a 35-foot back-in site. Okay, next we're going to be coming down row S from the main road, past Lee Hall and the Nature Center. 250 on the right is a 35-foot back-in site. 251 is a 35-foot back-in site. 252 is a 35-foot back-in site. 253 is a 35-foot back-in site. I'm going to kind of go down and around and loop around and come back up row S. In the opposite direction, starting with 259, which is a 35-foot back-in site. 258 is a 40-foot back-in site. 'These are good sized sites here. 257 is a 40-foot back-in site. 256 is a 40-foot back-in site. 255, 40-foot back-in site. And we end at the end of row S here, 254, 35-foot back-in site as we come back to the main road. Okay, next we're going to come down row T, starting with site 260 on the corner there, which is a 35-foot back-in. And then we start with some cabins. Cabin 11, cabin 12, cabin 13, cabin 14. Okay, cabin 15 is next. Cabin 16 is actually on the opposite side of the road. There's actually 6 cabins. Okay, next, we're going to go to site 266, which is marked as a tent only site. 267, which is a 40-foot back-in site. 268, 40-foot back in sight. Kind of go around the corner here, and at the end of the row is 269, which is a 40-foot back in sight. We're going to be coming down row U from the main street, starting with 270 on the right side, which is a campground host site. Next is 271, which is a 40-foot back in site. I'm sorry, pull-through site. 272, which is a 40-foot pull-through site. 273, which is a 40-foot pull-through site. 274, which is a 35-foot pull-through site. And 275 here at the end, which is a 35-foot pull-through site. Okay, we're going to be coming back down row U, this time on the left-hand side, starting with number 276, which is a 40-foot pull-through site. Next is 277, which is a 40-foot pull-through site. These are really good sized sites. Number 278, which is a 40-foot pull-through site. 279 is a 35-foot pull-through site. 280 here is huge, and it is a 45-foot pull-through site. At the end of the row here is 281, where they don't have an RV in here but just have a picnic going, is a 45-foot pull-through site. Okay, next we're going to come down row V, which just has two sites here on the left. It's 282, which is a 40-foot pull-through site. And next we have 283, which is a 25-foot pull-through site. Okay, next we're going to come down to row W. On the left-hand side here is 284, which is a 35-foot back-in site. 285 is a 40-foot back-in site. 286, which is another 40-foot back-in site. 287 is a 35-foot back-in site. 288, 35-foot back-in site. 289, 35-foot back-in site. Those were kind of close together. 290 is a 35-foot back-in site. 291 is actually a tent site, marked as a tent site. 292 is a 35-foot back-in site. And we're going to end it all off with site number 293, which is a 45-foot back-in site at the end of row W. Thanks for watching this detailed tour of Hanna Campground campsites. Please consider subscribing if you want to see more campground tours. Our next video will be on the entire Hanna Park experience, like its awesome beaches, mountain biking trails, hiking trails, kayaking and canoeing on the lake, playgrounds, disc golf, and much more. That video will also include some of the campground amenities like bathrooms and showers, laundry, campground playgrounds, lake pavilions, campground store, and much more. And remember, downsizing does make sense.